First thing when we're talking about routing in Ableton Live is that Live does not have aux tracks and it does not have buses. Those are the two big differences between Live and Logic and Pro Tools, is that there are no aux tracks and there are no buses. The way that you move the audio around inside of Ableton Live is slightly different. So if you are doing subgroup mixing, for example, so if I got over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in like a little drum beat here. I'm going to grab, I'll grab my 808 kit, and this one here, we'll make this the bass drum, and I'll duplicate it, and we'll put a snare drum here, and duplicate it, and put a hi-hat, and then let's duplicate this, and then one more, and we'll put some a perk sound in here, right? So if I'm kind of like making this beat up here, and I go over here to this one, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll hit go here, record, like slow that down there, and if I want to record into this, right, I can do like that. I've got a clip here. I'll make it a 2-bar clip down here in my length, and I'll just hit play on it. And now, when I can record into it, I can be like, you know, and I can go over here to my snare drum, which I'll just go to my snare drum track here, click on it, and record this in. Play that again. And let me just skip that start so they're both starting at the same place. There we go. Get a hi-hat line in here. There we go, there's a hi-hat line. Go over here to my percussion. Put a hand clap in here. This snare drum here, just move this up to the hand clap. Go ahead like that. Oops. Don't want to record the automation, turn that off there. Copy that name over there. There we go. So I got this little beat going on here. Let me just turn this one down. What I'll do is I'll just kind of, let me show you what I'm doing with my push here. I'm gonna put the push in the bottom part so you can see the push there. And just move that over there so it's not weird looking. There we go. I kind of want to just move the edge. That's what I want to do right there. Boom. There we go. Cool. All right, so now what I want to do is let me adjust some levels here. So I'm going to put this in mix mode here, and I can see all my different levels here. So I just turn this one down here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to route all of these drums here into this audio track here. I'm going to rename the audio track to drum group, and I'm going to highlight all of these, and I'm going to just go in here to where it says audio 2 right here. I'm going to change one of these because I've highlighted all of them, change one of them to drum group, and on my drum group over here the audio from says no input. That's good. I'm going to change my monitor to in. Cool. Got a little bit softer there because we're at -5 on that track, and there we go. Just put that back to 0 by clicking on it and hitting delete. And that's really all we need to do to route audio in Ableton Live. Now, a couple things here that I'm going to point out just based on like what we just talked about with our notes. There's no aux track. So what I did was I actually created an audio track. Let me go ahead and do that one more time for you here. I'm going to have all these here set to go to my main output, master out, so we can hear everything. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new audio track here, Command T to create a new audio track, give it a name, drum group, or spell everything out if you want, whatever you want to do. Now, the way the Ableton Live works is I'm going to send these tracks to this track over here. And you're just going to give it the name. So instead of having a bus set up like you would in Pro Tools or Logic, it's going to ask you where do you want to send the track? And you can send it to this name of this other track here. So all of these tracks here, if I just hold down Shift, I click on one and I hold Shift and I click the other one over here at the end, it's going to highlight all of them here. And I just go down here to my Audio 2 and I select Master. I just go out to my drum group here, and the drum group is just the name of this track right over here. Whatever this track is named. So if I call this one Henry, great. I can highlight these tracks here and just send them to Henry. There's Henry right there. If I click on this, they're all going over here to Henry. And now what I need to do is on this track here where I'm sending them to, set my monitor to in. What this means is that it's going to just take the audio and just pull it through, and it's just monitoring the audio, the input, whatever's coming into it. If I change the name on this track here to drum group, which actually makes more sense, even though Henry has a fine name, doesn't make any sense in this context. So I change it to drum group. Look what happens. Down here, all these tracks that are going to that, all these MIDI tracks that are going to that audio track are now, say, going to drum group, audio to drum group. And that's really it. It's like the type of thing that, like, if you don't know how to do it at all, it can be really tricky at first, but once you have seen it, if you already know how Pro Tools works or Logic works, instead of just using a bus and setting the input on the track to the bus and the output on the other tracks to another bus, you're not doing that. You're just saying, hey, just go to this track over here and hang out with that track. And that's what they're doing. Pretty easy stuff there. All right, but that's how we work with subgroup mixing in Ableton Live. And it's all right here in your notes here. This is a standard mix method of doing this. It's what we would use in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever. To subgroup in Live, you need to make an audio track act like an aux track. So step number one is you set the audio from to no input. This protects against feedback loops. That's something that I have set up as a default in mine, so I don't have to do it ever again, but you should do that. Step number two is you set your monitor to in on the track. Name the track drum group, then select all the tracks that you want to subgroup, shift click them, and then set audio 2 to the track's name, which is drum group. This step number 2 here, you might not be able to do that until after you do step number 5. It might be something where that monitor doesn't even come up. If you have this audio from set to no input, the monitor won't come up until later on. So it's just like this. In this picture right here, we can see audio 2 says drum group. Here, this one is named drum group. And as you can see, I abbreviate everything. That's just how I work. You've probably seen me abbreviating everything all the time. Make sure your audio from says no input, and make sure your monitor says in. And that's it. That's how you subgroup in Ableton Live. It's not super hard to do. Now, once we've got this subgrouped, I can go ahead and put effects. Let's put effects on the individual instruments here. So let's go ahead for our bass drum here. Let me solo that out. You'll notice that when I solo it, it's automatically going through the drum group, because the way Ableton Live works is by default these tracks are solo safed. Although you can turn that off down here. Yeah, you can turn off solo it in place if you want. So you could turn that off, but I leave it on. All right, so what we're gonna do here, Henry is a total drummer kid. So I'm gonna go over here to my bass drum, and let's go ahead and throw on a plugin. Let's go ahead and put on the Sound Toys plugin, Decapitator here, give that some oomph to it. Yeah, there you go, that one sounds nice. Drum fattener, should sound nice when with a name like that. And I'm going to go ahead and just cut this. There we go. Cool. Nice. Awesome. I'm going to send this percussion here to the reverb. There you go. And the reverb, I'm going to take the reverb and send the reverb back into my drum group. Now, before we do that, let's just talk about how we sent this percussion to the reverb here. And that's later on in the notes. Send effects. Here we go. So we're going to use return tracks for our reverbs and delays. Once again, there are no aux tracks in Ableton Live. We are using return tracks, what we call return tracks. And this is very similar to like how it's set up on a real mixer in the real world. In the real mixer in the real world, most of the time you have return channels. You have your send 1, send 2, and you have return 1 and return 2 that are usually stereo on the return side of things. It's just a dedicated stereo input for your effects. Now, these usually don't have any EQs or something on them like that. No EQs, no compression on a mixer. So oftentimes you want to bring that reverb or delay or whatever back into a channel on the mixer just so you have more control over it. But there usually are dedicated return inputs on the mixer. And that's kind of how Ableton Live is set up. Here on the right-hand side, we have these return tracks here. There's only 2 by default, but we can add more by hitting Command-Option-T. So I can add more of these, and you gotta add a whole bunch of these up. So there's no shortage of return tracks here. I'm just gonna delete these. And what we can do in here is say, all right, every time I add a new return track, it's gonna add another send down here on the bottom. Let me turn the cursor highlighter on, sorry about that. So I got my sends down here on the bottom and my return tracks up here. And if I add more return tracks, you can see it adds more sends down here. So let's say, for example, I want to add the reverb, another reverb in here. Let's go into, let's add a delay from Sound Toys. I'm a huge fan of Sound Toys here, and so we're gonna use some of these here. Actually, let's use the real Primal Tap. Do I need the real Primal Tap? Yeah, no, I'll just use little Primal Tap here. And these little ones here, little Primal Tap, little plate, whatever, these usually cost around, I don't know what the cost is, maybe like $100 for these, something like that. They're actually really, really great. I like them a lot. And then I've got in here, I've got little plate here, which is a plate reverb here. So we're gonna use these here. So I've got my regular delay that comes with Ableton Live here. And I've got my reverb that comes with Ableton Live here, and I've got little Primal Tap, which is my delay from Sound Toys right here, and I've got a delay, a reverb plate from Sound Toys right here. So what I'll do is, whichever one I want to send it to, I'll turn up the send amount right here, and that'll mean we're hearing more of that sound over here. So if I hit play, just solo this out. Let's send it over to that Primal Tap. There we go. So it's going into the Primal Tap. I'll click on the wrench to open it up. And there we go. Let's send that feedback up. Cool. Let's get some presets here. Now, hear how cool that is. Yeah, pretty neat, right? Yeah. Hear all these like weird sounds I'm creating here. Pretty fun stuff there. I'm going to grab the main version of Primal Tap here, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this little Primal Tap here. I might grab the real full version of Primal Tap because that allows me to sync and do some other stuff here. So I'm going to go ahead over here to this and let's set it to, set it to beats. Yeah, beats. There we go. Yeah, I prefer that. Cool. Change my feedback here. Increase the input here of the feedback. Go down to my tweak area down here on the bottom, and we're going to use, let's use a ping pong. There we go, nice stereo spread on that. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. So I like the way this is sounding here. This plugin is great. Oh my goodness. Felix, if you haven't bought all the Sound Toys plugins yet, you're missing out, man. Also, I should say that they have an educational discount, which is 50% off. So you can get there if you're a student, you can get the Sound Toys plugins for $250. All of them for $250. Everything that's in this list here, $250 instead of $500. And they're all amazing. So we got this one here. Let's go over here to the little plate and let's send this percussion to the little plate as well. Oh, love their stuff. And it's super easy. It's just got a couple of controls here. Let's make that a little bit longer. See how good that sounds? And I'm going to go ahead and take this one here. Now this is a thing that you kind of need to be informed about this in Ableton Live because it looks like down here on my, here, hold on a second, let me just color code these so that everything's the same color. And all my effects, I'll just make these all yellow just to make it easy to see on my screen what we're dealing with here. I'll just also do that. So here I've got my effects, my drums over here and my effects are over here. And what I want to do is I sent my percussion line into my Primal Tap and my little plate. But what I also want to do is I want to send the Primal Tap also into the little plate right there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go down here on the bottom. This is the one that's the Primal Tap here, the delay. And the plate is D and the delay is C. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it because right now it's grayed out, which means it's not really on, it's not doing anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it and click on Enable Send. And I can enable all my sends, but I just want to enable this one send right here. Now it turns it on, so now my delay will have the reverb, will be being sent to the reverb as well. There we go, nice. And what I'm going to do on this percussion here is I'm going to make this percussion kind of move back and forth. And for that, I will use another Sound Toys plugin. Let's use Panman. There we go. And I'm going to go to the rhythmic ones. And we'll go to TikTok Pan. That's not really what I want. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I like that. That's kind of nice sounding there. And you can see in here I've got a whole bunch of different controls for these as well. I've got the offset, the width, if I want to narrow this up so it's not quite as wide. And I can do that. Can make it wider. Can smooth it out. Down here in the tweak section here, analog style, did you hear, maybe you noticed how it changed when I put it through. Let's go to clean here. That sounds more like my original sound there. That's a different sound there. Slightly different, let's here, check it. Dirt, yep. That changes the sound a little bit. Crunch, shred, op amp. Yeah, so let's put it back on shred here. And I can actually increase the amount of that effect by turning up my input here. Cool. All right, so we got that going on there. Let's bring this. Okay, cool. So that sounds good. I like that. And it gives you a little taste of how we can send these things around. So we're going to use these two for this percussion thing here. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that all these effects here are outside of my drum group here. Now, if you've been paying attention in Pro Tools and stuff like that, some people have asked me, hey, Tony, do I send my plugins to, here, let me just get my picture up here. Do I send my plugins into my reverbs and stuff into my drum group or not? And I'll say it depends on what you're trying to do with it. And the same thing here. So right now I don't have my plugins coming back into my drum group right now. These plugins here are just going straight to the master out here. So we're going to change that in a little bit. But before we do, I want to add some effects onto my drum group here. I'm going to go ahead and hide my returns by hitting Command-Option-R. And we're going to go here into my drum group. And let me just show you another cool thing we can do with the push here. And this is, you know, we're getting into why I like the push so much. So it's a little bit hard to see my screen here, I think, like what it's saying. But what we've got here right now, it's in mixer mode. And I've clicked on my drum group. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Browse in here. And in Browse, I'm going to go up here and go to my Collections. And over here, I'm going to go to Groups. And over here, I'm going to go into my drum group, Ableton Live drum group, and I'm going to hit load. Now what this does is it's going to load up all of my plugins and stuff down here on the bottom that I like to use for my drums. And this is a drum group like we talked about yesterday, an effect rack. It's an effect rack that I made in the past, and I put it into my collections, and I can easily search for it here in my Ableton Live push. So what this means is that it means that if I set everything up ahead of time really nicely, it means that I don't actually have to spend as much time looking at my computer. I can spend more time looking at my controller and focusing on making my beats. Gonna turn that down a little bit. Cool. That's sounding pretty good there. Now what I want to do is I want to collect my snare drum and my hand clap together and make them into one instrument, one group here. Now the way I could do this is two ways I could do this. I can do it the way that I showed you before with my normal subgrouping here, which is, if I go to my notes, it's this one over here, just the regular subgrouping, the standard mix method. Or I can use the Ableton Live grouping method, which is also something you can do in Pro Tools and Logic now, but it started off in Ableton Live. What I can do is I highlight these two tracks, and I just hit Command-G. Let me go ahead and bring my window up here up top. Let me get this a little bit bigger, like this. Okay, so we can still see everything. Great. So what I want to do here is I go into my track here, and I say, all right, I got these here. I hit Command-G. And it groups them together into this group right here. Now, a couple things. One, if I have already sent these tracks to another track for subgroup mixing, I'm gonna have to change some stuff around here. It's not gonna automatically do it for me. That's because I've already done sending some things. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna highlight these. They're highlighted already. Highlight them and say Audio 2, and I'm gonna set it to go to my group here, group number 2 here. I'm going to name this group number 2 snare drum group, and you can see that these two tracks now are going audio to the snare drum group. And now the snare drum group, I'm going to send that to my drum group here. I know it sounds complicated, but actually if you just kind of stop and think about what we're doing here, it's really not complicated. All we're doing is we're setting the audio out, or the audio to, sending it to wherever I want to go, and we're just double checking to make sure everything is sending to the proper places. So if I go in here to my snare drum and my hand clap, I just have to make sure that this is going to the snare drum group, the group that I want it to go to. And the group, I have to make sure that it in turn is going over to my drum group. So we're just basically just, you know, connecting all these dots. We're setting up different dots. I've got my track, I've got my subgroup that I want to route it to, and we're just connecting the dot. And if I've got those inside of another group, I can connect that dot. Now, why would I want to put these into its own group? Let me go ahead and solo this out. So I got that snare drum there. I can adjust the level of these at the same time. Now, what I might say is, okay, the snare drum and my hand clap they're part of the same sound, which is a snare drum sound. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and lower the pitch on the snare drum here. I'm going to go down here to my sampler, go to my controls, go to transpose. There we go. Cool. And this one little beat here, this one, I'm going to go ahead and turn that one down so it's a little bit softer. There we go. Cool, I got that there. Now I'm going to run these snares, the snare and the hand clap, through another sound effect, or through another audio effect here. And we're going to go to my plugins, and let's use Camel Crusher. I like that one quite a bit. Now you can hear this one's like way over the top. I'm just going to go through some of these presets. There we go. I like this British clean here. It's not adding too much, it should add some nice thickness to that snare drum sound. Let's go ahead and unsolo that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some reverb into that. I'm going to send it to a reverb. I'm going to grab this reverb over here. And let's go ahead and send this to the reverb the reverb is on return A right there. Now that reverb, you can hear it's way too much. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a different reverb by clicking on the hot swap button there. Boom. Click on that. It's going to open up my presets for the reverb. And I'm going to go in here and go to room, and let's just select like ambience. There's that one. And I can just double click some of these and check them out. That one's probably a better one. And let me just show you some other reverb plugins that are pretty cool. Native Instruments just came out with a new one called Raum. R-A-U-M. Raum. Very Native Instruments of you. So let's go ahead and hit play. I'm going to go in here to these. Here we're going to go to small. There we go. Cool. And we're just going to make sure this mix is all the way here to completely wet here. And I'm just going to hit the lock button right here, just to make sure that this locks in. So when I'm changing my presets, it doesn't change that mix setting there. And there's some nice like presets in here. We can turn this up a little bit more. Can you hear there's some cool ones in here, there's some normal ones in here. Okay, so that's a nice little plug-in there. Let's go ahead and let's delete that one out here and grab a different plugin. We're just trying out some stuff here. The RC series from Native Instruments, again, is pretty cool. And I guess why I'm showing you these Native Instruments ones, because I recommend that if you're just kind of starting off with this stuff, I do recommend you would grab the complete package from Native Instruments. It's a good kind of overall, there's some good stuff in here kind of package. Although I will say that Arturia has been upping their game on as far as effects, and of course they've always had great synthesizers and stuff like that, but they're getting a lot more kind of generalized plugins for effects and things, and their kind of overall package is starting to look better and better for an intro package as well. But I still think Native Instruments has a little bit of edge if you need all these different sounds. So the RC24 here, like I said, it comes with complete, and it's basically an emulation of a Lexicon reverb here. So we're just going to go into small one here and check out some of these. And these, you can see that they automatically are just set to wet here, so that you don't have to touch the mix knob here. It's just wet, which just means it's like completely through. I'm going to turn this send down here. There we go. Let's just hear what these sound like. And I can go in here and I can click on the arrow. If I want less reverb, Basically what I want to do is I want to turn down my send to that reverb. There we go. You hear how smooth that sounds? It's a really nice little reverb there. Cool. So because we're coming from our snare group here, both the snare and the hand clap are being sent to that reverb, and that's why you're hearing it on both of those sounds at the same time. And you can hear, if I raise or lower this hand clap sound, it changes the overall sound of everything. What I could do is maybe put a little, let's put a little stereo spread on this. Let's see what happens. Let's go back to Sound Toys and use the micro shift. Turn on my focus here. Get a nice little tickle out on our ears there. Turn the mix down a little bit. You can hear that just kind of thickens things up a little bit there. Cool. All right. Yeah, that sounds kind of cool. Nice little stereo sound there. All right, next what we're going to do is we're going to pull these back into everything. Now, if I have a delay here that's just hanging out and I'm not using it for anything, I can just delete this, click on it, hit delete, and it deletes it, and now I've just got these other effects here, and it automatically corrects everything for me. It pulls that return track out of everything, and it just moves these down. Now, one thing that you might be a little bit confused about is, why does it just say A, B, and C? That's really hard to understand what I'm looking at. Yes, I would agree with you. What you can do is, let me pull your attention down here to the bottom left-hand corner. So if I just go down like this, over to the left, boop, 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 boop. This little section right here, if I mouse over one of these A, B, C, or D, if you look at that section down there, it tells me what plugin is on that channel and what my level is that I'm sending to that return track there. So you can see A is the RC24, B is the primal tap, and C is the little plate. Now, unfortunately, it's not right here in front of you. You do have to look down in the bottom left-hand corner, but you'll figure it out. I mean, it's not super crazy. It's not super hard. It's definitely not a deal breaker for using this thing. Okay, so we got this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these effects here, and I'm going to route them back into my drum group, because I want all my effects for now. Let's just try it and see what it sounds like to come back into my drum group. As it is right now, check this out. Here's what happens. If I go to my drum group, and let's go over here to my push. Let me just pull up the right. There we go. Boom. Wait, not that one. This one? This one here. If I go to my drum group here, and on my push, I want to adjust the level of my drum group, I can adjust that level right there. And if we listen, all right. Now what you'll notice is I'm not hearing any of the dry drums anymore. I'm only hearing the effects. And that's okay. There's nothing super wrong with that, but it's a little bit weird to mix with. So a couple things we could do. We could make a new master group for everything. And what I mean by that is I can say, okay, I want let's call this my drum mix group, like that. Made a new channel here. I'm going to color code it orange so it just goes with everything else. And all these effects, I'm going to send into that drum mix group here, like this, drum mix group, boom. And this drum group here, I'm going to also send that into the drum mix group. Remember, we can send groups to groups. Turn on my monitor in. And now we should hear everything exactly like what we just did. Yep, hearing everything exactly how we just heard it, except now I can actually turn down everything, all my drums at the same time. Pretty cool stuff. Now, You might say, well, Tony, wait, hold on a second. Why did you just make a drum mix group channel there? Why not just send all your effects into your drum group here? That's a great question. Let me delete this drum mix group here, and I'm going to send this everything into my drum group. So my drum group now is going back out to my audio master, and all my effects are going to go into my drum group here. Well, let's just remember what it just sounded like just a second ago. So let me hit go. So what I want you to pay attention to is I want you to pay attention to the reverbs, how the reverbs are not too in your face right now, and that delay, how it's not too much in your face right now. So everything sounds good. They sound like they're kind of like nicely in the background there. What we're going to do here is we're going to take all three of these effects and we're going to send them into our drum group. But before I do this, I just want you to notice the drum group has all of these effects on it. Remember, I did put all those effects on the drum group here. Let's go ahead and just see what those effects are doing. Yeah. See, we're compressing things a lot with our multi-band compressor. We've got our glue compressor here, which is doing some fair amount of compression. We've got a saturator here, and we've got a limiter here at the end. And we're not doing anything really with that limiter, just kind of making sure it's not clipping. But we are pushing things quite a bit with the multi-band compression down here on the lower left-hand corner. You can see we're doing 60 dB of gain on the input here, and we're doing quite a fair amount we're over the threshold quite a bit here. Over here, the glue compressor is doing a fair bit of gain reduction. So what does this mean? It means we're pushing into these plugins pretty hard. So to me, what I think is going to happen, well, actually, you know what? Let's come back. I won't say what I think is going to happen quite yet. What I'm going to do is I want you to think about what you think is going to happen, and I want you to tell me in the chat here, which is going to take a second because we're on Twitch. But why don't you let me know here in the chat, what do you think is going to happen? And let me give you some choices. Here's a couple choices for you. The effects are going to get lower because we're running them into everything and we're going to push them back into the background. So the reverbs, we're not going to hear them as much. Or the reverb and the effects, we're going to hear them more because now everything is going to get squashed together. We're going to hear them more. Like the delay is going to be louder, the reverb is going to be louder. We're going to hear the tail of the reverb longer, like that. So it's either going to get softer or louder. Which is it going to be? The reverb is going to get softer or louder with the delay and everything like that. All those effects are going to get softer or louder if we run them into our drum group here. What do you think is going to happen? The effects are going to be compounded. Louder, yes. What else? Who else has a thought about this? Compounded. They're going to get louder. I would say compounded is a good word. It's not really a word that we use too much in music, or at least I haven't heard it yet. So I think you should pioneer the use of the word compounded. I like it. What does anybody else say? I wonder, Nico, do you have anything to say about this? Or AJ? Let's see. Who else has something to say? AJ says louder. Okay. Crispy compounds. Compound. Get to the chopper. Compound the effects. So it'll be brought out front. Yep, Matt says that. Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's hear if y'all are correct or not. Let's go ahead and here's what they sound like now. Okay, and let's go ahead and put them into the drum group. Oh yeah. Oof. Wow. That's just like reverb and delay for days. Now it sounds like the effects have taken over everything. And that's because we've like just destroyed all our dynamic compression, because now all of our effects are going into the compression and stuff of the drum group. So what's happening is extra. So we're sending the percussion sound and the snare drum sound before they go to the drum group, before they're going through all these extra effects. And they're going into, before they're going through the compression and the EQs and stuff like that, the saturator. And then what's happening is these reverbs and delays do not have any saturation and compression on them at all. They're just the natural sound. They're coming from the natural sound of the drum. So what we've done here is when we send them back into everything, now those effects are now getting squashed by the compressor and the saturator. That's great. Great job, guys. I'm really happy that y'all got that correct. Now, how can we do this? What we can do is we can highlight all the return effects and turn them down. We might need to balance them a little bit separately from each other. Cool. Now, that's not a bad sound right there. And that's I do that a lot too, where I'll take it and I'll run the drums into the return effects, and then I'll run the return effects into my drum group again, and then I'll balance the sound out so it sounds nice. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. That's a totally fine way to do it. But just remember, you do have to go back and balance it out once you run these effects in. But the cool thing about this is now I can just turn that down and it sounds fine. I mean, well, now it sounds like nothing. It sounds, you know, but you get the point. My point is that it controlled everything. We're not hearing the reverb and the delays and stuff like that. Okay. Now, the other option, as I said before, is we're going to just take these. I'm going to put them back to 0 by hitting delete. And what I'm going to do is, instead of sending them out to that same drum group, we're just going to make another drum group just to kind of gather all the drums together, but without all the extra effects. So I'm going to make a new audio track here, call this one drum, what did I call this one? Drum mix group, what I called it. Make it orange as well. Maybe a slightly different orange so I know it's a mix group here. And all of these, yeah, I don't want to do it like that, yeah. So all these, I'm going to send it to my drum mix group. Boom. And when we do it like this, we don't have to make any adjustments to these instruments here. It's the complete natural sound of the instruments. And I still have complete control. Now, you might be saying, wow, but Tony, that's a whole lot of subgroup routing and stuff like that. It is, but who cares? I mean, it's totally, there's nothing wrong with that really. And what I could do now is I can collapse these down. And if I'm not really editing, if I'm not doing editing stuff in here, I can actually make these smaller by clicking on the right-hand side of each one. And I can just make it smaller like this. And now you can see everything changes a little bit. I got boxes here instead of circles for these, and I can keep my main subgroup mix here. I can make it, I can keep this main track bigger. And this is not a bad idea because you still got the tracks here and we can still see like what they are and stuff like that. But if I don't really need to touch them, I can just make my aux track nice and big here, and so that's there. In the push, I wonder if y'all can, yeah. So in the push, you can see they're all the same size here. Now the real difference, the reason, like using it like this, instead of just doing the Command G thing here. So let me just pull this up, let me switch these screens around here a little bit, like that, there we go. So if I wanted to do everything the Ableton Live way, remember what I did here with my snare group here, my snare drum group. I got a snare drum and a hand clap in here. And what I did was I just highlighted these and hit Command G. And I can fold these up, see this? I can go in here, I can click on this little button here and it folds it up. Now you might say, Tony, why didn't you just use that for everything before? And you can go here and I can click on this. And if you look at my push here, look at the push and see here's my snare drum group and here's my hi-hat. And if I click on the snare drum group, it opens it up. So now I can see snare drum and hand clap and it's all right there. And I can collapse this and open it up, and that's fine. I never really got that into doing it like that. It's not my favorite way to work, but it does the job. But really, the reason why I do it the way I do it is because I like to keep my brain open for Pro Tools, Logic, or Ableton Live, being able to use them, especially Pro Tools and Ableton Live back and forth. And because I do use Pro Tools quite a bit and Ableton Live almost all the time. I use Ableton Live more than I use Pro Tools these days. But if I'm using if I'm using Ableton Live, just the Ableton Live way, it kind of gets a little bit confusing when I go back and forth with Pro Tools. Also, because I do use hardware mixers sometimes, this just keeps my brain in a kind of like a neutral state when I'm using all three of these different devices, these different things, so that I'm not having to like go back and forth too much with flipping my mentality around here. You know, call me crazy if you want, whatever, but that's how I like to work. But one of the nice things about using the Ableton Live groups is that you can open and close the groups on here, so it saves space on my push controller here. Another thing is that you didn't used to be able to have subgroups within, or groups within groups in Ableton Live. Like if you had a group, you couldn't then send that group to another group. And now they've changed that with Live 10, that you can have groups within groups within groups. So it's fine. It works out. Yeah. So pretty cool stuff there. So I can open this up or not. But up to you how you want to use that. I think another thing for me is I don't like having the group here on the left-hand side of everything. I'd prefer to have it on the right-hand side, but that's just how Ableton Live worked it. And it makes sense how they have it there. I don't love it. So I constantly I like to have things like this so I can see everything right here. And what I'll do is if I just want to clean up my screen a little bit, I'll just make all these smaller like this. And now I've got a cleaner screen here. Yep. So awesome. Okay, if I go over here to my arrangement view, you can see how everything looks in the arrangement view, and it all looks basically the same. The snare group, drum group here is closed up, and it's the same stuff. If I wanted to make these smaller, what I can do is I can just close this here. You know, just close these like this, and now if I highlight these. Just make this a little bit bigger here like that, so they're all the same. If I highlight them, so they're all highlighted there, I can just drag them up and make them all smaller. I can also just close them like this to make them smaller, and I can just leave this one open here to make it bigger, and I can mix and stuff with it as well. So that's a couple little cool ways that you can work in here. All right, so we talked about the different ways to subgroup, and we talked about using send effects and return tracks. One thing, when I was sending my return track over here, sent my primal tap to the little plate here, make sure you don't send it to itself. That's gonna get you into trouble because you're gonna create a feedback loop. Now, if you do wanna create a feedback loop, let me just show you something that you can do that's pretty cool here. I'll do it with my snare drum. I'm gonna go ahead and make a new return track, and let's make it right here in the middle, boom. And I'm gonna call this one delay feedback. And the snare track here, we're gonna go ahead and send that to I'm gonna go ahead and turn that all the way down so it's not going to the reverb at all. Sort this out. Let's send it over here to itself. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna get the delay feedback. I'm gonna put an effect on here, and I'm gonna put just a basic echo, basic delay on it. So go to my audio effects and go to delay. It used to be called simple delay in Ableton Live. It's not called simple delay anymore. I'm going to turn my filter off so there's no filter on it at all. I'm going to set my feedback to 0. And now let's set this to an 8th note. I'm going to hit there we go. Dry and wet, 100% wet. Now, if I turn my feedback up down here in the bottom corner, it'll feedback more times. The feedback here just shows me how many times the delay is going to repeat. If I set it to 0, it's just going to repeat once. So it hits it, and it just repeats it one time. And that's what I want. I want it just to repeat it one time. Now, what I can do is I can go over here to my delay feedback here, and I'm going to feed it back into itself. And this is something that you used to not be able to do with Ableton Live a long time ago. This is a long time ago. What I'm talking about now is like over 10 years ago. It used to be that if you fed it back into itself, as soon as you sent audio to it, you would crash the program. But now it actually works like real audio on a mixer. If I enable this send, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and this is really works better if you have a controller. I'm going to go to my mix window here. I'm going to go make sure I go to my sends here. I'm going to go to send B, and here's my delay feedback. Here, let me just make sure we're looking at the right thing here. Yep, here's my delay feedback right here. And I'm going to be in control of this knob right here. So you can see it's on my screen there. Let me just here do like this. Get in here like that. There we go. So you should be able to see it on my screen in the bottom corner. You can see it here on my controller. There it is right there. So I'm going to hit that. Now, as I send it into itself, we're going to start to hear it repeat and feedback. And if I keep turning it up, and we have to be careful here because we don't want it to feedback too much, otherwise it'll start to create really nasty sounds for us. Cool. So you hear that? I'm creating that feedback loop by fitting it, by literally making a feedback loop. And we can keep it going for a while. And if we set it to 0, it should just keep going for forever. Now at 0 here, which is all the way up, it's not going to get out of hand or anything like that because it's just at 0. We're not going over 0. But let's do this. Let's go ahead and turn this down. And let's assign this to, let's put a EQ in here. When we get the EQ in here, then we can start to do some more interesting things. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the EQ after my delay. There's my EQ here. And we'll go ahead and put this into device mode. And if we look at here on device mode, now we can see there's controls for my EQ, my different frequencies and stuff like that. So I got frequency 4. Let's go over here to band. Let's go to band. Actually, let's not use this one. Let's use a different one here. Let's use the EQ3. This will give us a little bit more control over specific EQs and stuff like this. So I can set my high frequency, my low frequency. That's fine. And so I got my high, mid, and my low, and I can just set these to 0 here. So the sound shouldn't really be changing much at all when I hit go on this. Okay, I'm going to put this up here. Now if I put this up to 0, and I'll turn that down. And I'll boost it. And now what it's doing is it's feeding back certain frequencies. And I can control these frequencies as it goes. And you have to be careful that you don't push it too hard. There you go. I'm going to go ahead and stop that right there. So you can see that, and you can hear that with just a couple of cool little effects here, you can make some really interesting kind of dub delay sounds there. And I'm going to let you kind of explore that and play with that on your own if you want to. It really helps to have a controller. If you don't have a controller, it makes it really hard to use the mouse on these here. I've tried it in the past. It's not fun at all to use it without a controller like this. And this is one of the reasons why I love having this push here, is because the push really lets me really control things and see what I'm controlling. Actually, let me adjust my camera so you can see me better. I feel like you're just seeing the top of my head there, which is kind of hilarious. Hi, now you can see me better. Hi, this is what my torso looks like. Yay. All right. So, yeah. So don't send a return track into itself. This will create a feedback loop, unless of course you want to create a feedback loop. But if you do create a feedback loop and you hurt your ears, don't say I didn't warn you. Feedback loops are dangerous and can be really annoying or really bad for you. All right, so a couple more things here before we pause for a break here. The faders in Ableton Live can be extended. We just go down here and we grab one and we move it up and down, and we can extend it so we can see as much or as little as we want. I recommend to have them set so you can see the 0 here. What we're looking at each one of these is this -11.2. If I click on it, it goes back to infinity. If I hit play, whoops, let me get the whole drum beat here. Let's turn this down. Don't really need that anymore. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to go over here, turn solo off. What this is it's the level that we're peaking at right here. That's where we're peaking. This here is the level of our fader. That's what those two things are. So that's what we're looking at here. A is peak, B is fader level. That's in your notes right there. General Ableton Live mix tips continued. Over on the master channel on the Q out, you can set your headphone out separate from your main out depending on your audio interface. You need this when you're DJing. If you're going to set the Q out, if you're going to DJ with Ableton Live, you want to hear the tracks beforehand, then you need to set your Q out to something different like 3 and 4, and the master out would be 1 and 2. You can have pre and post fader based on the return track, not based on the sending track. It's a bit different from how Pro Tools and Logic do it. Pro Tools, each send can be pre or post, just like a regular mixer. Ableton Live, the pre and post is based on the whole entire return track, not based on the sending track, which is fine because if you're using pre and post, generally you're doing it because of headphone mixes and stuff like that. And then over here, this part here, the Q amount, sets the level for your audition levels or for your headphone out if you are doing a DJ mix. So it's either one. So if you're listening to drum loops and stuff like that in your browser over here, if I've got my browser and I have this set, so I want to check out all my different drum loops and things, so I go in here to my hip hop samples or whatever, and I go to Cosmic Hip Hop and I go to my loops and I want to hear these and I want them to be louder, I can just turn up my headphone mix over here. There we go, I can turn that down there. Cool, so that's how that works there. And then all that stuff we just talked about is right here. The Q out is here. I can set that up for different outfits, so I configure it. And I can set these to pre and post fader just by clicking on them. And that's about it, really. Nothing else too exciting going on over there. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and take a break. We'll come back and talk about freeze and flatten and then exporting stuff after the break. Let me go ahead and pause the recording.